But when we are meeting, it's important that we don't fall into the same traps that we did when we were in the physical office. All those hallmarks of wasted time and consensus seeking and outsourcing accountability that we found in the typical corporate office. This is our opportunity to move away from that, because all that consensus seeking just robs us of a sense of autonomy and control and agency and makes work very unfulfilling. So when it comes to meetings, 1, only hold a meeting if it is absolutely necessary. If you're only going to communicate information, most of the time that can be done through email, through Slack, through corporate intranets. It doesn't need to be done in real time. Now, of course, there are exceptions to that. If it's a quarterly meeting where you want the whole organization online to share wins and whatnot that the organization had through that quarter, fair enough. But 99 times out of 100, when we're meeting simply to communicate information one way, that meeting doesn't need to happen. 2, set the meeting to 15 minutes by default. For whatever reason, we've got this thing in our heads that every meeting needs to be 60 minutes by default, which is ridiculous. Most things can be sorted out in 15 minutes. And in fact, when you set yourself a shorter amount of time, it acts as a forcing function, and it forces you to get to the heart of the matter much faster. This is the essence of Parkinson's law. If you give yourself 1 hour to do something, guess what? It'll take 1 hour. If you give yourself 15 minutes to do something, guess what? It'll take 15 minutes. Makes a lot of sense. Now, of course, not only that, but you can improve the process by which people book meetings. So you could use a tool like Calendly or Ask Amy, for example, where you can integrate that with your calendar. Perhaps there's 2 hours a day where you're available for meetings. And if someone wants to call a meeting with you, you send them your Calendly link, for example, they'll find the next 15-minute slot that you're available and they'll book that. That way you can ensure that you have more control over your day and that your entire day doesn't get filled up with meetings, ultimately robbing you of time and focus to get your best work done. Number 3, make sure that there is a specific agenda going into the meeting. Very simple, but so often people go into a meeting really unsure what's to be discussed. And as that adage goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Number 4, invite only necessary participants. The amount of meetings I've been invited to for prospecting reasons, business development calls with potential clients, where 7 or 8 people were on the call from the potential client and I was the only one from my organization. If I had $1 for every single time that happened, probably wouldn't make me a rich man, but I'd have at least an extra $1,000 in the bank. And sometimes it's quite ironic because many of these meetings are to discuss the procurement of productivity training. So clearly these people need help with these things. So essentially what you want to do is invite only necessary people to a meeting, because this is the thing. If you invite 8 people to a 1-hour meeting, that's no longer a 1-hour meeting. That is a 9-hour meeting, including your time. And if you're working for a large organization where you're stealing a lot of time from that company, not only that, but the opportunity cost that comes with not investing the other 8 hours into more important work is very, very high. And when we invite everyone to every single meeting to discuss every single minor issue or question or problem, well, then we're creating a culture where nobody feels comfortable making a decision and taking action on their own. We're depriving people of agency. We're depriving people of the ability to learn. And we're depriving the organization of speed and ultimately a culture of innovation. Typically, in most cases, 2 to 3 people max should be sufficient for most meetings. There will be exceptions to that, but in most cases, if there are 4, 5, 6 people being invited to a meeting, alarm bells should be ringing. Number 5, I mentioned agenda a moment ago, but having a meeting, having a discussion doesn't really matter or doesn't make any sense if we're not going to capture 1, next steps, action items. Number 2, responsible persons, who's going to carry out these action items. And number 3, due dates. We have to keep people accountable. And again, that forcing function comes into play. Now, this is important as well because this avoids boomerang meetings, where we basically meet next week to discuss what we discussed at the previous meeting. That is an absolute waste of resources and a waste of time.